Hey, hello again. This is Ben here with Stude on the Lake. So I'm still down in Iowa. This is a week in Iowa, and I do most of the film work down here. So I did a couple days ago. I did the first watercolor video, and haven't seen that. You should go back and check that out. It was received pretty well, and I thank all you guys for that. And I'm getting a chance to put the studio in the studio on the lake, showing some different art forms that I like to do in my time off. I'm not an expert. This is Christmas card time, and these are very simple. Trust me, I can paint a lot better than this. I certainly can't paint to the point where I could make a living at it, but I do enjoy it, and it's fun. So that's a recap right there of the first video, and this one I'm going to show you how I go about cranking these cards out. These cards go down in this case, this year, they're going to a gallery down in Madison, Wisconsin. And they all get, they have an envelope that goes with them. I print them on, or I paint them on cards that I buy, I don't know, 100 cards in a box on 140 bond paper. But here's how I go about making a bunch of them, because they're a pain in the butt. And they'll go between $5 and $10 a card, ready to just a Christmas card ready to go. So here's the same setup that we started with yesterday. That's where I keep my watercolors. If I were to take a guess, I would say there's probably 150, maybe $200 worth of paint in there. Unfortunately, this is like all art hobbies. It's not a cheap hobby. When you pay $7 to $12 for a tube of paint, and then you pay about the same thing for a brush. And the nice thing about watercolor brushes is they're not like oil brushes. You don't have to make damn sure you wash them out, or they'll dry hard and they're ruined. So we're going to use the same setup, with the exception of the back of a large. This is the back of the dark color is the back side of a tablet that had watercolor paper in it, larger watercolor paper. But here's the card. So there's an envelope. I showed you that's on the side. There's 100 envelopes, 100 or 50, I can't remember. And if you're really interested, I'll try to find the lid to the box and give you that, or I'll look them up and I'll tell you where you can get those. And I really don't even know the cost of those. I would suspect they're probably $30, $40. So we're going to use, since these are really simple, we're going to use the palette. And the palette's on the left there. And for those of you that are just trying to get into painting, a palette means several things. One, it used to be where you had your thumb stuck through the big oval, Bob Ross style. You're standing up, you're painting. That's a palette, painter's palette. More significance on that palette is the colors that you choose to paint with. You've heard of Picasso's blue period and things like that. People change up their palettes. When we get a little deeper into this, I'll show you a couple of my landscape palettes with colors that I choose, and then I'll show you a general palette. And then this one right here we built on the left there, we built it off the colors of the rainbow, so it's brighter. Roy G. Biv, if you remember back in school when they were trying to teach you the colors of the rainbow. So I took these cards, they're double folded, and I made sure I had the right side on there. So I paint both sides. I put 4 of them, or 8 of them, 4 per side for 8, and then I just flip it around and paint. I'll paint 4 of each one at the same time. So forgive my hair in here. I got an idea. I got an idea for a camera mount. I'm doing this down in Iowa on a table, and when I get back up north, I do have a little painting studio in this section of one section of the house with a drafting table where I sit and paint, and I will rig a camera over that so you don't get my hair in the middle of it. It'll be a little more professional. So this whole thing is gonna start running at 2 times, and I'm gonna show you how I crank these Christmas cards out. How I'll end up with, in the next couple weeks here, probably 100 of them, maybe 150. So this is a funky Christmas tree, and this is one style of this Christmas tree that I do. I do another one, and I think I'll do a video on that one. This one's just straight, simple. The watercolor paper is not wetted, and I'm doing kind of a dry brush technique on this. And the second one that I'll show you, I think there's some of those those Christmas trees you saw like this style. that you saw in the beginning portion of that have a little bit more color saturation or whatnot. And I did that with a round brush, and I twirled the round brush, and it's a little more of a wet technique. But the intent of this was to just do simple, and they read pretty well when we're done. And I want the color to start out fairly pigmented and then kind of fade away, and then I'll put a little bit of cross color in there, as you'll see as we go along. But you're not going to get the fourth one just because of the camera angle and the way that I'm going. But I left that in there and didn't edit that out while I'm painting the fourth card, simply because it gives you a chance to take a look at the one or two first cards really show up, and it gives you a little more time to think about them. So I'm just choosing colors here. And I'm not being particularly careful about how I do that. I'm going to come back and address these a little bit. I'm not particularly fond of these, but these seem to sell really well. People like them, and they see something in them. And you see that I'm tagging, on occasion, I'm tagging into that other color, and it's starting to run down in and give a different hue. And that's the beauty of watercolors. And as we get further into this, I'm going to show you some techniques that I play with, and in future videos on how to bring the best out. And that's what I really like about watercolor. It is hard to control, but there are things you can do, and I'll show you as we go along. If you stick with it, and we stick with the series, I'll show you how to make those do what we want them to do, or get fairly close. And then, as Bob Ross used to say, the happy accidents sometimes are better than the other. And you try to recreate it, and in some cases you can. It has to do with where you put a drop of water, where you did something, when you sprayed it, if you're going to spray the whole thing, how you tilted it at a particular time. If you watch and you pay attention and you're a little bit more anal than I am, you'll notice something that you did, and it becomes a technique instead of an accident. So this side is going to be Christmas trees. There'll be 4, because I can't stand to paint 8 in a row. I can stomach 4. And the goal is to paint them really fast. If you think about this, these are for sale. If I were to do one of these, just to say I were to do you a card, you as an individual, and I wanted it to be particularly special and something really important, I would take a lot of time. It would take me probably 20 or 30 minutes per card to paint it, maybe even an hour. I might let it dry and do different things, and it would come out quite perfect on that. So I'm going to show at some point a different technique that's a little gives a lot more translucence to these trees. And I'm just going to, from here on out, I'm just going to be doing one. I just wanted to show you in this video how I went about doing the production. Instead of painting just one card, I'll paint 4 at a time. And I'll cycle through. I run probably 10 or 12 different patterns. I don't try to get too much crazier than that. There will be a few one-offs in the cards that I sell. Like I said, 100, 150 cards a year kind of thing. I do sign all the cards just for the heck of it. It's not a vanity thing. I just want to... I think that if you're doing artwork, and Jordy Johnson agrees with me, as do a few other people, that you should sign your work. My mother-in-law did a lot of painting. She took a lot of art classes, but she never let anybody see her work. And when she passed away several years ago, we found all of her materials, but very little of her work. She didn't like the stuff that she was painting. I did see some of it, and it was awesome. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. My daughter has a couple paintings, painting of that she did that she didn't like. But by all means, if you're doing artwork, save it, give it away, but sign it. You never know who may appreciate that in the future. And don't be a harsh judge on yours. I do this because it's fun, and sometimes it comes out to be an interesting piece, and sometimes other people like it. So, but I don't do it for other people. I do it for myself, and I do it because I enjoy it. So it's nice that we're getting back to getting to the original concept. When I first started all this, I wanted to do a studio and show a little bit of art, and mainly wood carving and that sort of thing, and occasionally the painting, and then occasionally some work with the pottery wheel and that sort of thing. I've always enjoyed art. So let's, putting little balls, Christmas balls in there, and I'm just kind of variating the colors. I'm not getting too much into color theory here. I try to, I do read up on it and look at it, or have over in the past, and I've forgotten most of what I know. I'll revisit that as I start putting out some of the videos, so that you get the true scoop as it is. I'm going to put out the whole lesson series. Like I said, I think I'm going to start off with somewhere around 15. This will be number 2. I'm going to leave the numbers in there, so if you miss one, you know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can just check them off. And by all means, subscribe, check out the other folks down there. I'm trying to encourage Jordy to do some painting. I was surprised by the number of comments on the people that normally comment on the wood carvings, that were a little bit shocked and surprised, and said that they also paint or do watercolor and various different things. At some point, we'll go into oil. I'm not going to mess around with acrylics. I don't paint on paper in a traditional manner with the acrylics. I do paint decoys with acrylics and that sort of thing. So it was kind of interesting. I was out just before I did this today. I was at Target, and I thought how it might be fun to pick up a kids paint set. So $1.99, I've got a kids paint set. I'm going to do a video on that against my, I don't know how many colors are in that thing, 8, 10 colors that I've got in this deal here at to the tune of, let's just say 7. So $60 for the paint that's in that palette on the left there, versus $1.99. Now, I'm going to get on a soapbox here. It has to do with woodworking tools. It has to do with carving tools. It has to do with, heck, even, all the way down to gardening tools. There are entry-level, beginner, fake, if you will. An example of this would be the $1.99 paint set for kids. And then I said in the last video, when you go to watercolor paint, there are considered to be 3 grades. There is the student grade, meaning you're taking an art class, you don't know what the heck you're doing, and you crank out tons and tons of whatever the teacher has for you to draw. They crumple up a paper bag, throw it in the middle of the table, and you're supposed to draw it. You're supposed to go home and draw 6 utensils out of the utensil drawer in the kitchen, that sort of thing. So you're cranking out a lot of material, and it doesn't make sense to use high quality paint. But guess what? It has the beginner, or not the beginner, the student grade has less pigment in it, and hence it's cheaper. A lot of times the carrier or the medium that's with that is a little bit different too. So then you go between the 3 grades, then you go to artist grade, and artist grade is somewhere in the middle, and then you go to professional or professional artist grade, which is the highest. So number 1 has less pigment, middle has a little bit more, and then the third one has what they'd consider to be an optimal number of pigment. Now, each of the different companies that make paints have different ratios of their pigment, and they have different formulas for their pigment. So you will find different companies make different things. Like, I don't remember the company, I'd have to look it up, but I only use one specific company for my oils. And the reason for that has to do with the pigments and the carriers that are in the oils, and I like the way they work. And I do most of my oil painting with a palette knife and a little bit of brushwork in kind of an abstract style, and I'll show you that one of these days. So this first one, I went ahead and did the extracurricular stuff around there, and that's just a little 6-star. And then I picked 2 or 3 colors, and that gives it a background. You can see that, and there it is. And then I went back and I take a yellow and put it in the middle of the darker colors. And these other ones I'm going to leave plain. They kind of look like, I guess the appeal to these, if I were to guess, would be, and you can see the colors are not running and mixing quite as much as they will when I redo this with a different brush technique, but people seem to love them. So there's the 4. They're not done. I'm going to give them a treatment, but we got to flip sides, and now it's time to go to the snowman. So pretty straightforward and simple, and that is one absolutely terrible circle. And keep in mind, I'm doing this on a table. I normally don't. I'm normally on a drafting board, and it has a little bit of a tilt to it. And as you know, I like to sit on my butt. I will even take this and sit in a chair and paint from the side. So the goal again is we're not doing fine art. We're trying to do Christmas cards that portray Christmas. And again, the same scenario here. You're going to miss the third or the fourth one depending on how I set this up. But I'm doing all 4 cards in sequence, and I'm doing them fairly fast. We talked about this in the first one. If these cards are going to go with an envelope and the plastic and the whole 9 yards, are going to go between $5 and $10 per card. I can't afford to take, or can't make any money, how's that, by doing 1 card at a time and taking an hour to do each card. So that would be working for basically $5 an hour. But if I can do 4 cards, and I can do these 4 cards in half an hour, you can see that I can get closer to my self-imposed, and this is a terrible wage, $20 an hour for doing this. And basically I do this in my time off and goof off. And I can assure you that my day job, flying EMS helicopters, pays substantially more than $20 an hour. So it's almost ludicrous to compare the two of them. And now you know why artists are starving. But that piece I put on there, you see I left the gap in the face, or in the head. I tried to make the head big enough, and now I'm coming back, I'm putting in a black. The carrot was also outlined in a black, and it's not really a black now, it's a Payne's gray. If I don't buy blacks in any of my colors, I mix for a black, because it gives me a warmer black. And there'll be more on that later on. So this is a really simple guy. He's looking up in the air. He's going to get some snow, and you'll get to see that effect later on. And again, I'm doing 4 of them. And the hardest part about this is to keep your hand out of the one next to it. Now on these cards, you won't see it here. I will take an art pen, fine line, in some cases, and go back and put in a little bit darker smile lines, because the one thing about watercolor paint is it is almost translucent, and it's not quite as dark. Okay, so we got a carrot sticking up in there. We're not putting any eyes in it. Don't have to worry about that. We got a smile, and now I've got a green, and you'll see that at the end. And we're putting in the rim of a stocking or knit cap. Again, there's not a whole lot of artistic to this. This is pretty simple and basic, and anybody can do this. And if you practice one, you build one, and then you start cranking these out, you'll get so that like this, you can pretty fast in production. So this is probably, I think I ran most of the stuff in here. You got very little without editing, and I ran it at twice the speed for the most part. So there's probably an hour and a half in this, and the reason it took a little bit longer than normal is because I have to stop and mess with the filming. Again, the technique I'm using is a dry technique, and it tends to leave more pigment. If you dilute it with water, you get less pigment, but it flows around and it creates that kind of translucent, sparkly effect. So there's the rim, and again, I'm leaving the fourth one's not in the frame, just to give you an idea of what's going on. I'm not being real particular. I'm coming back and putting a little bit darker shadow in there. This guy, I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to where the light's coming from, because it's not fine art and I don't care. And then I'm going to do a technique at the end, a splatter technique. So he needs hands up, as in, whoo, it's snowing. How outstanding is that? And I'm using a sienna color on this. I believe it's sienna. It might be orange. Heck, I don't know. I'd have to look. I will come back over this with a little bit of the Payne's Gray diluted down, just a very thin line to give it a little bit of like a bark texture, I guess, for lack of reference. I'm not spending a whole lot of time. I'm not doing a whole lot of thought on how I'm making these branches. I am trying to make them a little bit wider at the bottom and a little bit finer at the top. Here's the black. So while that's wet, I'm putting in one very thin line, and it will bleed and run across the branch, and it gives it kind of a bark look to it, as well as a little bit of context and contrast. So in wood carving, you're creating shadows by cutting the planes and various different things where the light would come across a piece. And in painting, you're creating the shadows by putting a darker color in there. And you're creating the highlights by either leaving that portion out as negative space, or you're painting in a light color. So here we've got cadmium orange. A word of caution to those of you, if you're going to go out and buy some paints, like I said, I would be err on the cautious side. Initially, go with the basic colors, or better yet, look up an artist on the web that you like the style of painting that they're doing, and see if you can get their palette. A lot of times, the artists will share the palette that they're working with. And that's worth its weight in gold, because then you don't have to figure out what colors to get. The only downside to that would be I do some strange things with my palette. I mix colors in a funky way. And just because I gave you the palette doesn't mean that you could look at what my artwork and figure out what the heck happened there. So here goes a hat. Hats are pretty straightforward. Nothing particularly creative about this. And you'll see I'm still, again, using more of a dry, and I have the water on the same side so you can't see what I'm doing. Yesterday I had the paint on one, water on the other. I put the paint in, and now I'm using a little bit of water and kind of letting it get out there and translucent. I'm leaving a tip on there because he's going to get a green pom-pom or a green ball. And the temptation here is to think you screwed it up. So if you were doing just this guy all by himself, one of them, and you started painting, you'd think, man, I really screwed this guy up. But one of the benefits and one of the neat things about doing a whole bunch of these cards is you stop and ignore the mistake. So if I were to make a big booger on one of these, I would ignore it and try to save the card. And a lot of times when I'm all done, and I'm doing this real fast, there'll be a couple that turn out better than others, and I can't tell you why. They just look better. So if you're looking at those hats, you can see between the 4 hats that you can see there, they're all just a little bit different. I'm coming back and putting a little more paint on the top, and then that will bleed sort of down, but not completely all in. And I apologize, this is going to be about 30 minutes, but it doesn't make sense to me anymore to cut the videos down to 15 minutes or so. If you're liking it, enjoying it, you'll watch the whole thing. If you're not, then you can fast forward and go through it, rather than try to edit 2 videos. So the green pom-poms are going in now. Twice the speed, but you got an idea of really kind of how fast I'm painting these. And I thought they needed a little more delineation just on that one side. All right, so here's the fun part. How do you shade them? Well, you got just a circle there. It's like a crayon coloring. It needs a little bit more snow, and I talked about it yesterday. Snow has and white has kind of a bluish tint to it. So rather than paint everything around the snowman blue and leave the snowman white, which would preclude doing this fast, you can certainly do that. If I'm going to do a snowman bigger piece, a study piece, or a standalone, I would probably paint the snow around, and I would leave the snowman white. And I would do that with masking, and I will show you at some point here in the future how that mask on watercolor works. It's a pain in the butt. Takes a little bit more thought. Now, here's a neat technique that you see how I got a little dark on my pigment there. too much pigment, not enough water, and that third guy. And all I was trying to do was just give a quick one over the world shade of this guy in blue. And I believe this is cobalt blue. So I've got a paper towel in my hand, and I'm working basically with water at this point. And again, I'm doing free brush strokes. I'm not trying to get fancy. I'm not trying to color inside the lines per se. But I'll take that paper towel if it gets a little crazy and rub that off. And if you put a big old drop of red right in the middle of the card, drop some water on it, take a paper towel or a piece of tissue paper, and you can blot that off. All right, so this guy, I think I don't remember how many, I did all the snowmen with the little 3-bys. So this is like a 3-star, 1, 2, 3 hash marks. They're not perfect, and then I change colors. I'll do 2 or 3, 4 colors maybe. I did yellow, I'm putting in an orange. I'll probably pick up a blue and then a little bit of red. And I do those at random. This kind of gives it a sparkly one over the world. This guy needs to look, he's looking up like, oh, thank God it's snowing. Of note, interesting note, I find, it's cold in Wisconsin. I like the winter. My wife likes the winter. We enjoy that. I used to live, when I was very young, for a couple years out of college in Nebraska, and I thought that was the coldest place on earth that I'd ever seen, coming from Oregon. When we went to Germany, they were like, oh my God, it's freezing in Germany. It was not cold in Germany. And now down here in Iowa, the fall's coming and people are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, it's freezing, it's cold. It's 45, 55 degrees and gets down to maybe 28 at night. And I like that. I don't put a coat on until it's about 45 outside. So there's a reason people like Florida, and there's a reason why I don't like Florida. So he's getting his highlights in. He got the blue in there. And again, I'm doing all 4 of them at the same time. I just kind of zoomed in on the 2. Here's the money shot. This is the point where people think that I might have ruined it. So I'm building a really, really soupy wash. And I'm using a fan brush. And I'm going to flick it. So I'm using it against a different brush, and you'll start to see little flicks of blue, and I will move around randomly. This is really easy to go berserk and overdo it, because it's actually kind of fun, this part here. So I will do a wash of blue, or maybe in some cases a light indigo, if I'm doing snow. And then you'll see, and I'm out of frame up here, I'm doing the Christmas trees that I did earlier. And if you'll remember, 3 of the Christmas trees, I did not do the little star technique behind it, like is on these guys, around it, to fill in the space. If you just leave the figurine out into it, it looks like pigs in space, and it looks like you forgot to do the art. At some point in the future lessons, we'll talk about the basics in art and framing. This is the gouache. Again, watercolor people think that this is blasphemy. They would prefer that you went back and used masking for every little snowflake that's on that guy's hat. You could put a little drop of masking, which is like a gum rubber cement, and then you paint around it, and when you're done you rub the masking off and you get the white underneath. Now that is a cool effect. It takes it's a kind of a challenging technique sometimes to work with, but that is what the purists would have you do rather than use this gouache. Now when you get to the art purists, and there's going to be some of you out there that are watching this that actually are art trained and will decide that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and you'd be right. Like I said, I've got 2 kids that are formally trained as artists, have degrees in art. And this would, just by the addition of the gouache, or the gouache, depending on how you want to say it, would be considered mixed media. So if I were to take a pen or a pencil and then add to this paint or change different kinds of paint, I start mixing the different mediums or media, and it would be a mixed media thing. So I don't get hung up on that. I do what I think, what's easy for me, what's fun for me, and what gives me the look that I'm looking for. If this needed some acrylic on it, I would certainly do it, although it's a pain in the butt. If you want brilliant paintings, use oils. To me, acrylics, and some people do wonderful work with acrylics. Acrylics always look kind of washed out to me, and they look just a little bit lackluster. And then I love watercolor because you can do all kinds of cool things with watercolor. So, how do you do production? I showed you earlier when I put this tape. I'll take this tape and put it on my jeans or on, and this is just standard masking tape. And by and large, at that point, it doesn't tear the cotton fibers. Now, right here, this one you'll see, and I'll only show you unmasking the one. This one is starting to tear the cotton fiber, and I can't get it to stop. So I go from the other side. I have a theory. One of the things that that watercolorists like to do, people that work primarily on this art, they'll tear the edge of the paper. So instead of having a cut edge, you'll have a print that has 140, 200 bond paper or something like that, and it's cotton paper, fiber paper, and the edges will be torn. I think they developed that personally, and I'm probably wrong, because when they took the tape that they were holding the watercolor print down to, it tore, and they went, "Damn, that ruins the whole painting." So they went ahead and just tore all the edges to make it look the same. I will take a little bit of water and fix that part back down. And since it's a card, it's a gift card, it's going to be treated badly. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. It shouldn't be tore all to hell. Some of them you have to discard, but if it tears a little bit, and that's not a big deal. You can preclude that by putting a little fuzz on the tape, either run it on your shirt, run it on something, take some of the sticky away. And that tore a little bit in that one corner and pretty nicely up in that corner. So there's that. We're going to wrap them up here. I do sign them, like I said, and I use an art grade pen just to do that. And there he is. That's one. They're unique enough and different enough, if you do 4 of them, that someone's not staring at the same thing. I don't write Merry Christmas. I don't write Happy Holidays. I don't write Happy Hanukkah on them because I want somebody to be able to do that themselves. If I were to put Merry Christmas on this card, unfortunately, I would automatically eliminate a few people. If I were to put Happy Holidays on this, I would annoy a couple of other people. So you buy the card, in my thoughts, you write on there what you want. And these are the most popular. This and a little different style, which I will just, from now on, I'm only going to show you one card, and you can see how that white flicking in there makes all the difference in the world, and how each of these comes out a little bit different. But these, ironically enough, are the favorites, as is the snowman. And how can you go wrong? I mean, that's a happy looking character, right? So from the future on in here, since it's Christmas card season, I'll run the next 3 or 4 paintings on Christmas cards, and I'll just do one at a time. And you'll get to see that, and just realize that one will get put on a production board like I just did there on the other side. So, hey, this has been Ben with Studio on the Lake. I'm glad to add the media to this. And the next one, I got a wand coming out for you guys. There's a little close-up, and they look much better in person. So like, comment, share with your friends, and subscribe by all means. I appreciate your support. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.